everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carlene Gordon. I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Officer here at Ameris Bank, and I'm joined by Mr. Rodney Bullard, who is also one of our board of directors. But I want to brag on Rodney for a little bit and all the accomplishments that he's had, and we just want to thank you for joining us today.
Truly my pleasure.
Rodney leads the Chick-fil-A Community Engagement and Philanthropic and Sustainability Strategy. He's also the Executive Director of the Chick-fil-A Foundation. And before coming to Chick-fil-A, Rodney served as the Assistant U.S. Attorney prosecuting complex criminal cases. Oh my goodness, that's pretty impressive. And for his service, the United States Attorney General presented him with the Department of Justice Director's Award. Wow, Mr. Rodney. And prior to this role, he was selected as a White House Fellow. It's the nation's most prestigious public service fellowship, and you were placed with NASA. So you were with the astronauts.
I was.
Wow. And you worked directly for the administrator for NASA.
I did. Now, I'm not an astronaut, but I did work with them.
Oh, well, I mean, it's still pretty impressive. Astronauts, they don't just hang around with the regular folks, so that just tells me how great you are.
It was wonderful.
But what are some things that people may not know about you, Mr. Rodney?
So first and foremost, I'm a native Atlantan. I was born here. My wife and I were born in the same hospital, Northside Hospital.
Oh, wow, okay.
3 days apart.
What?
And so I've known her all my life. And we have grown up in this area, and we moved away, but we've come back. And it's wonderful to see the diversity of Atlanta. It's wonderful to see Atlanta grow in the manner in which it has. And it's wonderful to be a part of the Ameris Bank family. So thank you for having me.
Oh, no, thank you for joining us. And it's been such a pleasure getting to know you. And, we're here to talk about a topic that most people weren't aware of, or they weren't even aware of, the holiday Juneteenth. And they, I think last year, a lot of people, it came up and they're like, well, what is this?
Yes.
So, tell the folks, what is Juneteenth?
Carlene, for me, I grew up in Atlanta, but my father grew up in Houston, Texas. My father came to Atlanta to go to Morehouse College. But I would go back to Texas, and I remember when I was a young child celebrating Juneteenth, because Juneteenth has its origins in Texas.
Right.
And so as you may recall, Texas was one of the further west states. And during the Civil War, as the Civil War was coming to a close in 1865, generals and the Union troops were just getting into Texas. And so it wasn't until after the Emancipation Proclamation, which was in 1862, and the Emancipation Proclamation, as you know, freed slaves in the southern states, but not in the border states. And so that's an interesting conundrum that Lincoln had, that he did not actually free slaves in the states that were still loyal to the North.
Okay.
So he only freed slaves via the Emancipation Proclamation in the states that, frankly, he did not have control over at the time. And so it was during that time after the war, as the war was coming to a close, Union troops were just now going into southern states and freeing slaves. And so they went into Texas, and Texas had not heard about the Emancipation Proclamation. And General Gordon Granger went into Texas, and via Executive Order number 3, he issued a proclamation that the 250,000 African Americans there in Texas were freed. And so Texas celebrates June 19th as their day in which they learned about emancipation.
Wow.
And he did that in Galveston, Texas, which is right outside of Houston. And so I remember going to Houston because it was a big deal.
Right.
There were always festivals, and you always had to eat something red beans and
rice. Yes, red, right?
That's right.
Red is such a big part of the Black diaspora, that red is a big color. Like in Jamaica, we have red with sorrow, or part of the, certain flags when it comes to the Black Liberation flag. Red is a big part of that as well. So what are some of the red things?
So in Texas, big red soda, red beans and rice,
Yes.
which, you in Jamaica, you probably call it peas and rice.
Rice and peas.
Rice and peas,
Yes,
there you go.
yes.
And so it was interesting, hot sauce, something as small as that, but red represented the blood and the sacrifice. And it's a wonderful holiday, and obviously, as you know now, it is a national holiday.
Yes, first, the legislation was passed by the Senate, and now it needs to go through the House and signed by the President. Then it's a federal holiday.
That's right.
Wow,
And
that's
so,
pretty amazing how far we've come,
and
no?
unanimously passed by the Senate, which is
That's,
amazing.
I know. I was shocked to hear that. There was
So,
a holdout person and they decided, no, we're going to pass this unanimously, which was pretty amazing.
so a big deal. And Juneteenth is a special day. And it's not just a special day, I think, for those in Texas or for those of a particular race or ethnicity, but it's a special day for America because it really represents a day in which all of us begin to appreciate and experience freedom.
Right,
And so we all can celebrate in that.
right. I think so. I think when you think of it, think of the opportunity that, people have been able to have because of Juneteenth. And, one of the things that I call 2020 is the 2020 vision, right? The 2020 vision that we were able to have in 2020 came along, we had a pandemic, but it allowed us to stay still.
Yes.
And we were able to see things. And some of those things we were able to see, the injustices, and we were able to see people really coming together
Yes.
as a country. Where there was division, I thought we saw a lot more people coming together, uniting about making sure that we all have similar freedoms, right?
That's right.
For you, what was your 2020 vision?
No, very similar to yours. You think about this invisible disease impacted us all in the same way throughout the world.
Right.
That we all had this same experience, and that throughout the country, regardless of your experience, regardless of your background, regardless of who you were, it made us really understand that we all are one, and that we have this human experience, and that we have this American experience, and that we need to really focus on our commonalities and what brings and binds us together. Because we all were sitting at home. We all were on Zoom. We all had the same, how do I navigate this newness? And now, as we're coming out of the pandemic, prayerfully, we have a renewed sense, and we don't forget that we had this shared experience.
Right.
And that we continue to celebrate things together like Juneteenth.
Right.
Celebrate diversity and equity together. And I think that's really critical.
And for those who may not have grown up in the South and may not have had the experience of having Juneteenth celebration, what are some things that they can do to celebrate the holiday?
Absolutely. I think of Juneteenth in the same way as I think of July 4th. And I think that you can celebrate it in the same manner. I think you can celebrate it with red, white, and blue colors, which are the colors of Juneteenth. I think you can celebrate it in the same manner of fireworks, and you can celebrate it in the same manner of educating yourself about the history. I love history, and so the history of July 4th is American history, but so is Juneteenth. It's American history.
Right.
And so I think there are opportunities to get books and read and watch movies. And so Lincoln, done by Daniel Day-Lewis, is a wonderful movie about Lincoln and really this struggle that he had on the question of slavery. And I think it's also an opportunity to get to know your neighbors and to celebrate with your neighbors.
Right. I had a Juneteenth celebration for the first time last year, and my red was red velvet cake.
There you
know,
go.
because that's a big
Is it
deal.
good?
It was real good.
I know.
Red velvet cake. Then we had the strawberry soda because we had to have a red drink.
Yes.
But I'm Jamaican, so I had to put the rice and peas in there.
That's right.
So it was one of those wonderful things, and I had a really great experience because it made me feel connected to the culture, and I wanted my son and his friends to want to join in, and they did, and it was great. How do you celebrate it now that you're here in Atlanta?
So I celebrate it in part by calling my family in Texas, because it reminds me, because that was my origin of learning about Juneteenth. I call them and I connect with them, and I now do Zoom or something with them. And then we celebrate it. My wife has started a bakery, and so she does a wonderful red velvet cake as well. And so I have, it's an excuse for me to eat red velvet cake. And any excuse is a good excuse, but this is a good one.
Hey, it's a good one, yeah.
So I love that you all, and I will try yours too. So
Probably not as good, but
I'm sure it's just as good, and I'm sure I will like it just as much.
I'll stick to the rice and peas. I promise you prefer that one.
I would love to try that too. and food is such an important part of how we celebrate. And it's an important part of our own individual cultures.
Right.
Every ethnicity, every country has their own food, and we celebrate and we come together around that.
Right.
I think that's critically important. And what's important is that we just don't celebrate it as African Americans
Right.
or those of Caribbean descent,
Right.
but that we celebrate it all together. That I know as much about St. Patrick's Day, and that someone else also knows about Juneteenth.
Right. 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 I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think the great part of this holiday is, one, if you're able to be educated about it, understand the why, and then we celebrate why. The reasoning why is freedom, right?
Yes.
That we all were able to start on the journey of getting to freedom. Now we're clear what didn't happen overnight. It didn't just switch over, right?
Yeah.
But we're here. And the fact that it's a national holiday now is pretty amazing.
It is.
Now, there's some businesses that may be struggling with, how do I incorporate this in my business? How do I help employees celebrate without feeling like we're appropriating the culture?
Yes.
What are some suggestions that you would have for them?
One of the things we did at Chick-fil-A last year was our officer corps asked me to give a rendition of the history of Juneteenth, so that we all could, one, start off with the same playing field of understanding the import and the reason. So this right here that you're doing here at Ameris is so critically important, so that people can all understand the import of it and appreciate it and appreciate one another. So I think that's one place that really you could start with. And then I think another is having the advent of the food. When I've been in other places, in the military and other places elsewhere, and we celebrated a holiday or we celebrated an event that was particular to one ethnicity, we did it so with food. And that really does bring people together.
It does.
So I love that.
It does. I think one of the things when I was doing my research is they were like barbecue, and I was like, I love barbecue. Oh, we should do that.
Yeah.
We're still in the middle of a pandemic, so maybe not right now, but I can't wait until we're able to have, food events where employees can come together and really get a good understanding of one another, because I think it's really important.
It is. The other piece that I think about as we're talking is volunteering and giving back, and reminding ourselves that we are blessed. That we're blessed to have a job. We're blessed to work for companies that are doing well and that are really able to invest in the community. And how can we invest in others and going back on those days? And as we talk about the King holiday, it's a day on, not a day off.
Right.
So how can we invest in others on that day?
Right. Right. And when you think about the role that we're looking at Juneteenth, now that it's now a national holiday, and we're starting to educate people, there's a real symbolism of freedom, right? And there's certain things that, like you're saying, you experienced and I experienced that probably our ancestors never experienced.
Yes.
And I do reflect on that quite often, on how I'm able to be here today. Is that something that comes up for you too?
Yes. There's a wonderful phrase that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams.
Amen. Yes.
And we really are. The thought that an enslaved people in shackles, that they had to be freed, that they had to learn about their freedom months and in some cases years after it occurred. That then juxtaposed to where we are. Look, we still have a long way to go.
Right.
And there's still struggles and there's still inequities, and we see that on the news. And sometimes we feel it personally.
Yeah.
But we are so far along, and the opportunity to live in the manner in which we live. But with that becomes a responsibility.
I agree.
It comes a responsibility that we don't forget the shoulders that we stand on, the sacrifices that were made, but even more so a responsibility that we have to open and hold doors for others, so that they also can be our wildest dreams.
Right. My dad has a phrase, he says, make sure you send the elevator back down.
Yes.
Right? So you may be on the way up, but while you're on the way up, make sure you send that elevator back down.
That's right.
Because if you are there, you are able to create opportunity that others aren't aware of.
Yes.
And if thinking of that, what are some things that people have done for you when it comes to being a mentor, when it comes to being a sponsor, and when it comes to being a ear that listens to some of the things that you're going through?
No, without question. I've been blessed with wonderful mentors of all ilks and all walks, and I've learned from so many of them. And I'll never forget a gentleman when I was in the military, Colonel Will Gunn. And Colonel Will Gunn was a White House fellow, and Colonel Will Gunn had gone to Harvard Law, and he had gone to the Air Force Academy, and I had done none of those things. But Colonel Gunn took me under his wing, and he enabled me to, one, have the confidence that I too could do those things.
Okay.
And that was huge.
Right.
And I could see myself in Colonel Will Gunn, who looked like me, who came from Florida, a southern state like I did, and played basketball where I played football. So I could see that it was possible. And so the role model of Will Gunn, and you know, Will Gunn's not a household name.
No.
But for me, he was my North Star. And so having a North Star, and then also recognizing that we have to be someone else's North Star is critically important. When I think about leadership, I think about three things. I think a good leader, one, is competent, and that's critical, that they have to know their craft. A good leader also is a good person, has a good heart. But third, a good leader has to provide agency for his or her people.
Right.
And that means, look, you have to have enough comfort to be able to be yourself. You have to have enough comfort so that you can be your most confident and best self. And I have to provide that shade and covering for you. And if you mess up, my agency is going to help lift you up so that next time you'll do even better. And I think that's critical as we think about diversity, that we think about belonging, that we think about comfort, and we think about providing agency for people.
I agree. I think one of the things that as a good leader, it's, you know, you're providing your people with the ability to really show up, right? If you're able to show up as your full self at work every day,
Yes.
You will then be able to say, okay, we may be doing it this way, but there's a possible another way,
Yes.
right? And if that is fostered in your employees and in the community, change really starts to happen, right? I love the saying, be the change you want to see. So
Yes.
I love to be a change agent. I love being a champion for others. And I love the idea of being the person in the background pushing you forward, because
That's right.
I don't need to get the accolade of, oh, Carlene did this for me. That's nice.
nice.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yay. What I like is that you're able to go forward and do such great things that I can shake my pom-poms and
That's right.
say, absolutely, this person is doing a great thing. And I think people seem to have, you know, they don't understand the differences between mentoring and sponsoring, right?
Yes.
And mentoring, you can give people advice.
That's right.
But really sponsoring someone, right? So why don't you explain to folks what the true meaning of sponsorship is?
Yeah. It really, sponsorship is, I'm going to have a responsibility, and I'm going to help you. I'm not just going to show you. So I'm not just going to show you how to fish, but I'm also going to be there helping you hold the pole. I'm also going to introduce you to people. I'm also, even more so, which is important in a corporate world, I'm going to talk you up.
Right.
I'm going to say good things about you. I'm going to help enhance your reputation, and I'm going to give you opportunities. Those things are so critically important. Mere mentorship, I just show you how to do something, but I don't give you opportunity. I don't say good things about you. You know, that's limited. It doesn't really get us where we need to be. And frankly, you know, those who ascend because they're good, but they also were seen and recognized because someone else started the conversation about how good they are.
Right.
And Carlene, I want you to think about when you've had a leader who truly was an agent or a sponsor for you, when you had a leader who really, you know, took you in and pushed you and encouraged you, how did that make you feel? And what type of loyalty did you have for that person and the organization?
I will say, the first few conversations I've had with Palmer, one of the things he said, well, I heard about you. And I smiled, and I was just so I felt so good that my name entered the room before I did,
Yes.
right? And that's what sponsorship really is, where your name is entering the room in spaces that you cannot.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have people that, one, are sponsoring you and really see your value. So that's what, a couple of questions came in, about what is real sponsorship and mentorship and why it's important and why does representation matter. One of the first times when I moved south and I worked for a tech company, I had my hair in braids. And I was a HR leader for that organization, and an employee came up to me and was just shocked that I had braids. And she said, "Wow, I didn't know you could wear braids to work." And I was floored because I'm coming from New York City, right? You wear your braids, you wear your hair, you wear your curls, you do whatever. But this is why sometimes, representation matters, and having the freedom to fully be your whole self at work, right? Has a real effect on the other employees and in the organization. What are the times that you felt yourself being able to show up fully and being able to represent for people who didn't necessarily know that they could be wholly themselves?
Yeah. I had an experience early on after law school, and I was practicing law, and another attorney, more senior attorney than me, he told me, he said, "Rodney, you're more than enough." And it was a simple phrase, but it really gave me the confidence to be who I am. He said, "You're more than enough. Be confident in that. And regardless of what other people may say, think, or feel, know that you're more than enough. And you can come with your full self when you internally understand that you're more than enough."
That's so apropos that you said that, because so many people have an imposter syndrome, right?
Yes.
And folks don't know, they hide it, they have a mask on.
That's right.
Or, and I think that is so great that to think about it, I am everything that I need to be right now.
That's right.
Right? I don't need to be someone else, nor should I try to be anyone else. Right? But that's harder. It's easier to say, harder to do. What is some advice that you'd have for someone who is struggling between the I must present this way at work and I present this way at home, and I don't feel like I am enough?
Sure. There's always a cultural awareness of, look, I have one set of presentation, everybody with family or friends versus at work, but you spend so much time at work.
Right.
And the opportunity to build relationship in a work family should be intentional. And I want others, as you asked the question, to really understand that it's natural to have some anxiety about that. So don't beat yourself up about that. It's natural to have some sort of sense of imposter syndrome. Don't beat yourself up about that. But quickly get over it. And quickly notice and understand you're as good, you're as capable, and you belong. And when you bring your best self, your most confident self, you can do anything. And if you're not in a place where you can truly do that, then find another place so that you can truly do that. But, from what I've seen and what I've experienced, Ameris is a wonderful place that really allows you to do that. And I know Palmer is a wonderful leader that allows his team to do that. And so that's really important. So if you're in a place where you can grow, relax, take a deep breath, and remind yourself every day you're more than enough.
I think that's such a wonderful message.
Yeah.
You are more than enough, right?
That's right.
Because you are. You
That's
are.
Right.
I sit on the fact that God gave me everything that I need, and everything that I need is within me, right? It's something that I sit with, because there are times that I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. We all do it. We all do it. Someone was shocked that I said I have those moments. I was like, what am I, not human?
That's right. Everybody
I am
has those
100%
moments.
human. I 100% have the emotions that you have. I just build a bridge and get over it, right? I acknowledge what I'm feeling, then I build a bridge, and then I walk over it. I get over it quickly, because I literally think about the things that I do today will affect the people behind me.
That's right.
Right? The things that I do today, I want to be really strong shoulders, like the ancestors have shoulders
right.
that I'm standing on. I want to be really strong shoulders that people can step and sit on my shoulders or stand on my shoulders and know that you are going above and that you're going to do amazing things. Like, I love that phrase. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
If I think of it, I think of the fact that I came from country Jamaica, right? Country Jamaica, where electricity was, this is the 70s. So and then to see that my son is a graduate from Morehouse College, right?
All those things.
And isn't it crazy? He was 6 years old researching Dr. King, and he said, I'm going to graduate from, go to Morehouse like Dr. King. I said, okay, if you're going to go to Morehouse, that's fine.
Yes.
And to see that come to life, you manifesting your destiny, that
That's
was
right.
amazing, right? And think about it. When you think about your ancestors, where you've come from versus where you are now, and being their wildest dreams, what are some things that come up for you?
You said it. I think about this notion of a bridge. And I think about this notion of a bridge in so many different ways. I think about it personally in the manner in which you just articulated, that your mother was a bridge for you to be where you are. And you've been a bridge for your son to achieve new things. And now he'll be a bridge for a whole new generation,
Right.
yet unborn.
Right.
But we also not just have this opportunity to be a personal bridge, but we also have this opportunity to be a bridge to our community and bridge to one another. This conversation here, just the education about Juneteenth, that's a bridge to someone else who didn't know about Juneteenth. It's a bridge to someone else who now can have a connection with you, have more of a conversation with you. And this sense that, in COVID, we had this bridge experience because it connected us in a way that we had never really been connected before.
Right.
And so I think about, as you said, this notion of being a bridge is so important. And we're more than enough as individuals, but we're also more than enough as a community.
Right.
And we have to realize that too, and stop creating whatever division holds us back and create bridges to one another.
And that brings up to another question that I have. There are a lot of people who may not be of the Black diaspora, and they have a lot of questions about Juneteenth. They have a lot of questions about,
That's great.
The culture, and they're very careful. They want to appreciate, not appropriate, right? Give some examples of what is appreciation versus appropriation.
Yeah, and look, I may not be the expert on that, but I can tell you that appreciating is, in some form or fashion, being curious, asking that question.
Right.
And it's important that we answer that question. Appreciation is also experiencing and being a part of something. And appreciation is celebrating at the same time. Look, I'm not Irish, but although my last name is Bullard, I'm not Irish. But I celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and I love all of the aspects of Cinco de Mayo.
Yes, I love a Cinco de Mayo.
Without question. I'm not of Mexican descent, but I understand the history of it. I understand all of it. Those are opportunities for us to be in cultural awareness, but also in cultural empathy with one another.
Right. And I always say, if you are interested, you want to have a good conversation, there's some research that you can do. You can read up. What are some things that you've read up on that have really, because we were talking about being a history buff and that you really studied these things. What are some things that made you well read about Juneteenth?
Yeah. So I particularly love Civil War history. So Juneteenth obviously is rooted in the Civil War, rooted in the 13th Amendment, which came after the Emancipation Proclamation and came after Juneteenth.
Okay.
So the 13th Amendment didn't actually occur until 1865, December 6, 1865. And so that's when that's when freedom actually existed for even those in southern states such as Kentucky or Missouri that were Union states but still had slavery. West Virginia, so a number of states. So, the misnomer that this is the last moment of freedom. That was the moment of freedom for Texans.
Okay.
So African Americans or blacks in Texas. And still there was yet a way to go. And we talked about earlier watch night service.
Yes, I was just going to ask you about that.
And so I celebrated, my father, a Baptist minister, grew up celebrating watch night service or going to watch night service. But at least here in the States and amongst African Americans in this area, watch night service derived from us watching on December 31st, 1864. Before the emancipation, 1862, before the Emancipation Proclamation was going to come out in 1863 on January 1st.
Wow.
So blacks were watching, literally watching for freedom, celebrating, praying, and it was called Freedom Eve or Freedom Night. And so watching for freedom for the Emancipation Proclamation. And later, the 13th Amendment would come later. But it's interesting that we have all of these traditions, and sometimes we don't know their origin. So for me, that was a really big thing that I like to study and look back at history and look back at the why, so I can be even stronger in what I'm doing now.
When you said that to me today, I was like, what? I had no idea. I've been going to watch night service my entire life, and I thought it was just, we're watching for 1 year to start to end, and we start the new year in the house of the Lord.
That's
You
right.
know, that's just what
And
I
there is
knew
an
it to
element,
be.
and there is an element of
There's
that.
that,
Absolutely.
but you know, sometimes we don't know the back history
That's
of
right.
it. You know, and that's just so interesting. I had no idea. But that's why it's so important to do some research, because you find out those little tidbits that you had no idea was going on, right?
That's right.
Oh my goodness, that's pretty cool, right?
That's right. And it's so easy to do now.
It is. Google.
Yeah, Google.
Google. You know, when I lived in New York, one of the things I love to do is go to the Schomburg Library.
Yes,
Have you
yes.
been?
I have been.
I used
absolutely.
to go to the Schomburg, and I would go there for their lectures and talks, just to get myself a better understanding, because I don't like to talk about something without really knowing it. I'll shy away from the topic because I hate to be loud and wrong, right?
Yes.
I like to know what I'm talking about and stand strong in my truth. But I do think that there's so many resources, and sometimes so many organizations will have, you know, different lectures or different talks, or just, you know, to give you some really good information. Yeah.
You know, it's, you talk about the Jewish tradition, and the Jewish tradition, which particularly talks when thinking about the Holocaust, has a slogan of never forget. And I think it's important that we don't forget. Don't forget the whys. Don't forget the origins. Don't forget the import and the sacrifice. And we shouldn't forget our ancestors. Our ancestors should live on in our memories and live on in our activities. One of my favorite Bible verses is Hebrew 12, that we encompassed by a crowd of witnesses. And when I think about that, there are a crowd of witnesses, our ancestors, who are watching us run our leg of the race.
Right.
And so we have an audience that we have to satisfy, and that we have to make sure that we are doing our best as we run our leg. And then one day we'll be also in that crowd of witnesses, and then someone else will be running this race.
Right. Oh, I love the way you just said that. You know, because you think about it, I love to watch relay, right? I love to watch the relay, and I love to see the thing that I love to see is the handoff.
Yes.
How are you going to do the handoff? Is it going to be smooth? Are you going to
Yes.
fumble? And you know, that's the part that I want to make sure that I am running the race, and when I hand it off, it's such a smooth transition that you just glide.
Keep on moving.
You just glide and you take off. You know, that's my goal anyway.
That's a good goal.
That's my goal. So when you're thinking about, you know, a question that came in is, you know, what are some of the struggles that you experienced early on, and some that you may experience right now when it comes to continued success, right? You know, you get your launch pad, and then you are pushing forward, and then sometimes there's a roadblock and you kind of scrape your knees a little bit, right? Can you help folks understand, you know, being you, right? Being Rodney Bullard, the bull. You had the opportunity to experienced some really great things,
Yes.
right? But it wasn't always roses,
No.
right?
Never
How did
is.
you, what are some things that you used or that you used to pick yourself up and help with that continued success?
Yeah. You know, it is something that we've just talked about. First and foremost, we all experience difficulty, headwinds. President Bush, when I was a White House fellow, had a wonderful quote where he talked about the soft bigotry of low expectations, and specifically was relating to a soft bigotry of low expectations that we have for our children, and specifically children of color.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we can have that for ourselves and for our children, and we have that for fear because we don't want them to fall. But we have to soar, and we have to go as far and as fast as we can, and that's really important. And when I think about when I fall down, I really do think about that crowd of witnesses. I think about my grandmother, my grandmother in Chattanooga, Tennessee, she had a 5 and dime grocery store. And to think about African American female who was the sole owner of a 5 and dime grocery store, she was an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And so I have an obligation to her. And I think about her mother who had 17 children, and they were sharecroppers.
Right.
And I have an obligation to her. And then I think about my mother who was an educator. And when I had a difficult time reading in first grade, my mother took me out of one school and placed me in another so that I would not have a stigma and I would have confidence. And she made sure I got the help I needed. I have an obligation to her. So if I fall down, which we all do, remember those whom we have an obligation to and get back up. And even more so, remember that we have to shoot for greater things. That yes, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, but the dream can't just be here. The dream has to continue to elevate.
Right.
And the dream has to continue to have legs. And so I love the notion that you can do anything you put your mind to. So continue to try and make those people proud. Continue to try and make, even so, your son proud, because now he's also watching you.
Right.
And watching what mom is doing and how mom is doing it.
I will say it's so, you actually brought back a memory for me. When I first came to America, I was 6.
Yeah.
And my mom was a stickler, okay, about your books, okay? So everyone else may be outside playing. She had us in front of our little composition notebooks,
Yes.
writing or reading. And so when I first came here, I was reading quite well. And in Jamaica, I was doing so well, they put me up. I was in the 2nd grade.
Yeah.
So I graduated high school at 16 because I was already skipped a couple times, right? But when I came to Reading, Pennsylvania, I remember someone being so shocked that I could read, right? And then I remember them not really pushing me. And I was just thinking about that soft bigotry of low expectations of why would we expect a 6-year-old immigrant girl to be able to read at our level? And the slowly of putting me in levels that I wasn't a part of or should not have been in. But moving to Brooklyn, New York, and with my mom, she's just like, we're not doing this, okay? What we're not going to do is you're going to be successful if it kills you, okay? And truth believe, my son was the reason why I pushed so hard. Every time I saw his face, I was just like, you're going to get better than I had.
Yes.
You're going to be better than me. And because I had him when I was in my sophomore year of college, he said, Mom, I can't complain about life being hard. You graduated college with a baby. And so for him, he just thinks, if Mommy can graduate college with a baby,
What can I do?
why can't I?
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Why can't I?
That's right.
And as part of what you're saying, I always think, how can I make life better for him? And he's thinking, if my mom can do it, so can I. And I think that's just, one of the things that we show people, our tenacity and, that grit.
Yes, that grit.
When you have that grit, you're able to bring people along and they are there with you. And that's what I try to help. Anytime I have a conversation with any employee, I push them and I say, you are the architect of your success.
Yes.
Remember that. You are the one that has the ability to really think and define who you are and what you want to be.
Yes.
I don't care what happened yesterday. We're looking at tomorrow and we're looking at today. What similar conversations you have with people who are starting to think that maybe I'm not good enough or I can't do this?
Yeah. You said something that it made me think about a book that I read, which is called Grit. And Grit looks at what traits do successful people have. And resilience and grit are central to success. And we really have to continue to foster that. And that's one of the things that I talk about with my team. And it helps us focus more inwardly on our own abilities and our own drive versus focusing on what the naysayers are saying or what other people say. Because people are always going to have something to say, and they always will have an opinion. I'm a large African American man, so the first thing people think is, oh, you play football or you do something, and I did play football 20-something years ago.
Right.
But I've done a lot of things since then. And, those stereotypes don't have to be our reality. But I love the notion of grit. So instilling that in our children early on, instilling that in our employees. Because even if you think about what Ameris and other companies have gone through during a pandemic, closing down your retail operations, at least your physical retail operations, changing your retail operations and how it works, having to go through a whole host of things that requires resilience and grit and requires a mental strength and that we have to exhibit. So I think that's important.
Yes. So I'm going to get into some of the questions that people had for you.
Let's do it.
What do you do to ensure equity and social justice in the workplace?
I think one of the things that I try and do to ensure equity in the workplace is talk to each person about their own dream. At least so, from a team standpoint or a department standpoint, I want to know, what is it that you aspire to? What is it that you're trying to do? Because your desire is going to be different than someone else's desire. But equity comes in, how can I help you? My role in being an agent for you, my role in assisting you, that's my equity that I can offer you. But also equity in how I treat people and how I see people and the opportunities that I provide for people. That's critically important. And accepting feedback on it. Listening, because look, I'm not perfect, no one else is. We all have our own blinders and we all have our own cultural sensitivities and insensitivities. And so being open to that, when someone says, hey, Rodney, you might want to think about this or adjust this or say that, or go talk to such and such person that you may not have spent some time with. That's important. And that's an important cue that we have to listen to.
Right. And how important is it that leaders embrace diversity in the workplace?
I think it's critically important. Diversity in the workplace has this notion of colorism, and it's so much bigger than that, but it is that too, and we can't dismiss that. But diversity in the workplace shows up when you have two people show up, because they're not going to be alike. They're going to be different. And diversity in the workplace is going to really show up when you have two people who don't look alike, who come from different races, ethnicities, backgrounds, geographies. And what I have found is, and what studies from Harvard and Stanford and elsewhere show, diverse teams are much more successful.
36% more.
That's right, much more successful. And teams that also even more so are diverse and have a purpose, an articulated purpose that's just bigger than even the work, they're 400% more successful. Millard Brown survey. It's really important that we embrace diversity, because we're embracing skills. We're bringing new skills to the fight, to the table. And if we're able to do that, then we now have a different team. I watched my Hawks beat the 76ers last night. And, Trae Young has one skill, but Capella, the center, he has a different skill.
Right.
And they can't just win off of Capella's skill as a center. they need Trey Young's skill shooting from the outside and driving to the lane as well.
Right.
So we all have skills that we bring to the fight. And so diversity is that, but our world is diverse. And our life is so much richer when we embrace that. I don't want to just eat, you know, one type of food, but if I have a smorgasbord, if I go to Clark Street Market and I've got all sorts of foods there for me, I'm happy about that.
Right.
It's no different in the workplace, and we have to start thinking about that. And the last thing I'll say about diversity that we have to really think about is it's not a zero-sum game.
It is not.
And if you do well, it doesn't mean that I do poorly.
Right.
Or something's
that I
taken
take
from
away
me.
from. Right, exactly.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean that it's taken away from you because someone else is doing well.
that's right.
And I really want people to get outside of the mindset, like you said. It's not black, white, man, woman, right?
Yes.
It's not just race. It's not just gender. You and I, we're both from the diaspora, right?
That's right.
If you hear me, you would never know I was an immigrant.
That's right.
Right? But I have a much different cultural experience than you do.
That's right.
And I look at things very differently because I grew up in country Jamaica, or I was born in country Jamaica, and then I lived in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is small town USA.
Yes.
Different mindset. And then I was in New York City. Wholly different mindset, right?
Yes.
And now I'm South. So I have a bit of everything. So the way I see things won't be the way you see things.
That's right.
And, you know, that's why diversity is so important, that we are not looking at, I think sometimes organizations get in their own way with the cultural fit part, right? Yes, you want people that absolutely can acclimate, right?
Sure.
But you want people with secret sauce,
That's right.
right? The folks that are able to really think about how can we do things differently and it's be a complement to our organization.
That's right.
I do see that we have some questions from
Good.
outside, and Ann Stanton, can you tell me what are some of the questions that are coming in?
We do, Carlene. We have two questions. The first one is, how can a non-BIPOC individual celebrate Juneteenth?
All right.
Oh,
I think it's a great question. And I think anybody can celebrate Juneteenth.
me too.
And should be embracing Juneteenth. And we said a little bit earlier, you know, you can celebrate Juneteenth in the same way you celebrate July 4th.
Right.
That you celebrate freedom, and you celebrate with food, and you celebrate by calling your family, you celebrate by having a good time. And if in fact you want to celebrate with your coworkers, call them and say Happy Juneteenth Day. It will
Right.
floor them.
Yes.
And I think there are plenty of ways in which you can celebrate it.
I agree. I think some of the things that you can do, if you can do a research online, and it'll tell you the
Yes.
foods that are associated with Juneteenth. Like
right.
we were saying, beans and rice,
Red.
barbecue. Make sure you have a red drink. So strawberry soda. If that's too much for you, get some cranberry juice. It's okay. And red velvet cake. Those things are really important. But you can research online the things that you can put together for your Juneteenth celebration. That would be great. And be loud about it. Invite your family, invite your friends, invite your colleagues, and that you all can, you know, think about it and have them come, you know, with information that they've learned about Juneteenth and,
Yes.
and share it with one another. I think that would be a great way to celebrate it.
Absolutely.
Our next question is, what are some good resources to self-educate on the events surrounding Juneteenth?
You know, I think there's some wonderful resources. Just Googling Juneteenth and history, you'll find a number. Ann Gordon Reed wrote a wonderful book, a bestseller, On Juneteenth is the name of the book, On Juneteenth. You can find children's books on Juneteenth. So there's a book called On Juneteenth, or Juneteenth for Maisie, rather. So it's a children's book, and it's a wonderful way to teach your children about it. You can go to Time Magazine. They have an exploratory discussion on Juneteenth. So there are lots of ways in which you can find out. And you can go in depth about the Civil War history and learn about General Gordon Granger and how he was a hero and he distinguished himself in the Battle of Chickamauga, and now they sent him to Texas for a specific reason. You can talk about Lincoln and how he agonized over this question of slavery and all that went into that and what he did and did not do. You can go deep, or you can keep it at a surface as to why it started and how in Texas they learned about it in Galveston Bay, because that was the place in which General Granger made his announcement. There are plenty of ways in which you can research and learn more about it. But the books, I think, are a nice way to really share with others about Juneteenth.
Yeah, and I think if you are looking to, gather in a setting, there are a lot of virtual events. If you look at your, look up your city and type in Juneteenth, there are a lot of nonprofits that are doing things for Juneteenth.
Yes.
That would be something you want to be a part of. There are a lot of virtual events that you can listen in and learn, or I doubt there are a lot of people doing in-person events. I would probably shy away from
Although
it.
Carlene's going to have red velvet cake.
I am going to have red velvet cake if you want to come up to Duluth, but I probably won't open the door because I'm still a pandemic, okay? I'm fully vaccinated, but still a pandemic. We're not doing this. Next year, got you.
We'll have a celebration next year.
Yes, we will. Let's have a celebration next year. Do you have another one?
We do have another one, and Rodney, this is specifically for you.
Okay.
As an Ameris Band Corps board member, how are you supporting the advancement of social responsibility strategies?
I'm proud to be an Ameris board member. I enjoyed being a board member at Fidelity, and then come the acquisition. I then transitioned into the Ameris boardship. And working on corporate social responsibility, you've seen the advent of the foundation, you've seen the advent of corporate social responsibility. I think Michael Pearson and Carlene are doing a wonderful job in the community, getting out. You've seen just Ameris' name being affiliated with other things in the community. And this sense of financial empowerment and financial responsibility, this sense of children, that's something that Palmer has always been about, quite frankly. And I've seen him be involved, whether it be with the Atlanta Food Bank or whether it be through Junior Achievement. I've seen those involvement opportunities. So it is still an area of growth, and it's still an area in which more can be done without question. And in fact, Carlene and I were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
But it is an area of focus.
Right.
And it's an area of focus that is of import to the board, and even more so, it's an area that I know is of import to your CEO.
It is something that's very important, and I know Michael Pearson is working hard at it, and it's something that we discuss quite often, and he is the right man for the job,
Yeah.
I'll say that.
He's doing a great job with it.
Oh, yes. And so I believe we are now out of time. We are coming to the
it went
end.
so quickly.
I know. I felt like it was 2 minutes.
That's all right.
I just want to say thank you for everyone who joined us today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something, and I hope you will join us the next time we have one of our Fireside Chat. I want to thank Rodney
Truly my
so
pleasure.
much for being a wonderful member of the board, but also someone that I can call and say, hey, I have a question, and I really appreciate the fact that he is there for me. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.